Before we dive into today's episode, a quick reminder that early bird tickets for the Heart Centre Business Conference in Noosa in September are closing on the 13th of March. Don't miss out on securing your ticket to this amazing, spectacular, uplifting, connecting, inspiring, and practical business conference with like-hearted entrepreneurs, industry-leading speakers, including the one and only M. Rasciano, and just a beautiful opportunity to step away from your business for a few days to focus on making strategic decisions, getting inspired, getting motivated, and getting clear on exactly where you are headed from here. Go to tashcorbin.com/conference and grab your ticket before early bird closes on the 13th. I hope to see you there. If you've ever wondered whether those people who seem to just linger around the edges of your business are genuine leads or potentially they're just a lurker, then this episode of the Heart Centre Business Podcast is going to be very helpful for you. Because in this episode, we're going to answer the question, are they a lead or are they a lurker? And the way we find out is through qualifying questions. This is episode number 514 of the Heart Centered Business Podcast, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/514. And because this is day 5 of Tashmas, I've got a special gift for you at the end of today's episode as well. So let's dive in. Are they a lead or are they just a lurker? We're going to figure it out together. Let's do it. Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Now, one of the things you may have heard me say if you've listened to this podcast fairly consistently is that if you are waiting for your leads to reach out to you and tell you that they're leads, i.e. I'm interested in your program, I'm asking questions about your sessions, how do I find out more about working with you, then you're missing out on 80% of the leads in your business. You are missing out if you aren't being proactive with qualifying and inviting leads in your business yourself. Now, what I will do is I will link to a previous episode of the podcast with the show notes of today's episode where I talk about that in a lot more depth. And that is going to be with the show notes at tashcorbin.com/514. But if the only people that you have coming in as leads in your business are people who are reaching out to you, you are not going out and finding them, you are not going out and asking them, then you're missing out on 80% of the potential leads in your business, if not more. So number one, we want to ensure that we drive up your understanding and excitement for lead generation in your business, because lead generation has a direct relationship with sales numbers. How many people you reach on social media? Does not. How many people are on your mailing list? Does not. When I say leads, I mean people that you have had a one-to-one conversation with, either in writing or on a Zoom call or on a phone call or in person, where you know they are actively interested in accessing support. It might be yours, it might be generally, right? But you know that they are a potential client for your business. Individuals. I'm not talking about I have 78 people on my mailing list, I have 78 leads. No, I'm talking about qualified leads, people who are actively considering working with you, who are actively looking for support, who are actively seeking help to achieve a specific goal, and you have invited them to move closer and to consider you, and they've made a move closer, yeah? And in most cases, you know who your leads are because you've spoken to them one-on-one in some way, shape or form. Even if it's in the comments of a post on socials, you have qualified. You have asked questions, and the answers that they are giving you indicate, wow, they're really keen to work with me, or they're really keen to find an answer, or they're really keen to invest in getting help with this, or they're really keen to keep moving closer to buying, right? There's a range of different things that are signs or signals that someone is a hot lead. And so we're just looking out for one of those signs and signals. But if you're waiting for them to tell you those signs and signals, you're leaving a bunch of leads to just float out there and try and figure it out themselves. Your job is to get out there and qualify as many leads as possible. Okay, so hopefully that is clear. Now, over the last couple of years in particular, I have run more workshops, extra bonus sessions and programs where I've been talking about lead generation specifically. So inside Takeoff, we did a process called Leads at Speed. The last virtual conference was specifically about lead generation. I've been doing a lot of lead generation work with particular clients as well. And so one of the things I observed fairly consistently was people talking about lurkers. And they were complaining about these lurkers. So when I ran Leads at Speed, people were like, yeah, but I've got all these lurkers on my mailing list, or I've got all these lurkers on my social media. And it's, I just wish they'd either like make a decision or go away. And so there was this sense of almost like frustration at having so many lurkers in their business and in their mailing list, in their audience. But whenever someone talked about it, I would lean into that. Be like, okay, well, tell me, who are these? Like, what's going on? And more often than not, when we talked it out, the person that they were talking about or the people they were talking about were not lurkers. They were leads. They were not even lurkers. So, you know, some people were saying like, oh, I've got this person, she comments on every post that I put up on social media. She's never once booked a sales call, never once taken up any of my offers. And so we literally went and had a look at all the comments. I was like, this person is actively looking for help. This person, like, have you ever asked the person, hey, what would it take to get you on a call? Right? Or, hey, what would you need in order for us to get you booked in? What's going on? And like, no, I'm stumbling over my words because I get so excited by it. Because for me, what can look like a problem to one person is an opportunity in my eyes. So when I asked, what have you done to check, to qualify, to see if this person wants to work with you, all they had ever done was post or email or do broadcast things. And this was just one example, right? This was just one person who was talking about one person who was prolifically commenting on their posts on socials. But when I was having this conversation with one person in Leads at Speed, there were so many other people in the comments going, oh my gosh, I've done this too, right? And so it's that whole sense of this person is giving you an indication they're interested. And instead of just saying, hey, are you interested? Or, hey, what do you need? Or what's plaguing you? What are we doing here? Right? Instead of asking that person directly, you passively share something with your entire audience, but it's with the hopes that that one person takes action on it. And so it almost feels a bit passive aggressive from my perspective, but it's very passive, right? You're using broadcast formats to ask something that would be far easier to just directly ask the individual. And a story that's just popped to mind, I think it's a really good analogy. So let's go down a little, we'll go back to Tash's history when she worked in corporate, was I had a colleague and she was so amazing. She was so much fun. She was stunning. Like she was such a catch. She was a single lady. She'd had a long-term relationship that had broken up. She was in her late 20s and she was sort of feeling like her time was past, like she was too old. Looking back now as a 44-year-old, almost 44-year-old, I'm like, oh my goodness, like the things we used to think about ourselves in our late 20s. But anyway, that's by the by. But she had a crush on a guy who worked on our floor, and he didn't work in our division. He worked for someone else, but he was on our floor. We'd see him a lot. We knew he was single. We knew she was single. And I thought that they would have made a really cute couple. And I used to say to her so often, you should just go up to him and say, hey, you should take me out on Friday, right? That would be so much more straightforward. And if he goes, nah, I'm good, it's done, rather than just constantly trying to be subtle about it. But it got to the point where we had a floor morning tea on Valentine's Day, and I had made a love heart cupcakes display, and Tash always into the social committee things, #extrovert. And so we were all standing around having our little heart chocolates and our little cupcakes and our cuppy teas, and I asked, is anyone doing anything fun tonight for Valentine's Day? And she said, I'm still open to invitations, so tell your friends, right? It was funny and people giggled, and then we moved on. Someone else was going out to dinner, blah, blah, blah. And when we went back to our desks, she was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, but I just needed to make it really obvious. And I actually think she did the opposite, right? I was like, did you make it opposite? Did you make it obvious? Because you said, tell your friends. So you're implying that no one who was in that conversation was someone you wanted to go out to dinner with. You didn't say, I'm open to invitations. Anyone want to take me out? You said, tell your friends. And so I was like, right, I'm taking this into my own hands, because by not saying something directly and just broadcasting it, she thought she had said it the perfect way to say to him, you should take me out, but in a safe group broadcast way. But actually, I felt like she'd done the opposite. So I went up to him and I said, let's say her name's Megan. Hey, you know how Megan said that thing about she hasn't got any plans tonight? Was your takeaway from that you should ask her out? And he goes, no. I was like, right, that was the intended takeaway. Do you want to ask her out? And he's like, what is this, high school? I was like, yes, it is, because I think you two would be great together, and I feel like neither of you are going to take the leap. So here I am, matchmaker Tash. Fast forward, they did actually end up getting married, so I did a great job. But there is a risk that they never went out with each other because she was broadcasting her openness to going out on a date with someone, but she just didn't ask directly, right? Now, ultimately, the risk is that she said, hey, you should take me out, and he went, no, I'm good. And I understand that we are so rejection sensitive, and that fronting up to that rejection is really challenging. But if we think about this in the lens of lead generation and making sales in your business, is it worth learning how to have someone say, nope, that's not the right fit for me, and feel good about ourselves in order to get to the point where you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars? I really think that if I was to lay it out and spell it out of what you actually would be exposed to, and if I said, you getting rejected 50 times in the next 3 years will ensure that you make at least $150,000 this year, $250,000 the next year, $350,000 the year after, would you say, I could do that? That's a viable trade-off, right? We're not thinking about these things from a very logical perspective. When we are in rejection sensitivity, when we are avoiding that direct asking the question, we're getting stuck in our amygdala, right? It feels unsafe. And it doesn't feel unsafe because someone's saying to you, oh no, it's not the right fit for me right now, is actually life-ending. It's because the fear of that is sending signals to our brain to be on alert, to be hypervigilant, that something is unsafe. And we need to collect evidence that doing that and having someone say, no, I'm good, is safe. That is the way we move through it. It's not avoiding the rejection. It's actually learning and collecting evidence that the rejection is not life-ending, that it's safe to have conversations with people. It's safe for someone to say no. It's absolutely fine. So what I've done is I've put together some of the ways that we can ensure we're asking those qualifying questions to establish whether someone is actually a lead or a lurker. So, number one, someone signing up for your free stuff, commenting on your posts, reading your emails, sitting on your mailing list without buying. Are they a lurker? No. They are a potential lead. They're not yet a qualified lead, but they are certainly a potential lead. And imagine having someone who's a potential lead in your business, and every time they're giving you another little reminder that they're a potential lead, you're cranky at that. I mean, you and I wouldn't be frustrated by our most engaged audience, would we? No, I mean, other people are. I definitely see it. But I really want to use this as an opportunity to draw to your attention that perhaps you have a more engaged audience than you think. You have more potential leads in your business than you think. The problem is not that your content's not strong enough or that your offers aren't strong enough. It's just that you're not actively qualifying your leads. And that's something that's in your control. That's something you can take care of rather than just trying to guess, well, what way do I need to talk about this offer to get them to self-identify? What way do I need to share my content to get them to take the action and book the session with me when you could literally just ask them? So that is number one. Next up, I want us to think about whose job is it? Whose job is it really here to do the qualifying? So it's not your audience's job to self-identify as a lead. It is not your audience's job to make all the decisions and join all the dots together. That's actually your job. So they're following you for a reason. They clearly find your content engaging, or maybe they met you at an event and they've just kept engaging with your content because it's valuable, or they think that it's going to help them. Like, we don't do these things out of charity. We're doing these things because we are genuinely interested in this content or this conversation, or there's something that we want to achieve that it feels like you could help us with that, or at least your content could. It's not their job to take the conversation to the next step. That's yours. And so it's important to engage back with that engagement, but do it in a way that is allowing you to discern, are they a lead? Is there a qualifying question that you could ask? Be helpful, engage back, and importantly, ask questions. It's your job to qualify whether someone's a lead or not. Next, then, we need to think of how. How are you going to qualify? Because one of the things that I do see a lot of people doing is they do respond to every comment that they get on socials, but they respond in a way that shuts the conversation down. So let's say they share a piece of content, someone comments and says, wow, that's really useful, thank you. And they say, you're welcome, glad it helped. Okay, cool story, right? All you're doing is you're doing the algorithm thing of commenting back on comments. But did you want people to engage with your content to feed your algorithm? Or did you want people to engage with your content because they're potential leads? I would much rather get 3 comments from people who are potential leads than get 16 comments that feeds the algorithm. Like, what is the ultimate goal of what we're doing here? It's to get clients. And so have a look at the way you respond to comments and ask yourself, am I actively nurturing this relationship and qualifying leads? Or am I just closing off the conversation? I'm just commenting back because I was told I should. I see this even a lot on Instagram, more than Facebook at the moment, where people are commenting and then the original poster comments back with a few emojis, or they comment back with like 3 words, and it's just completely shutting the conversation down. It almost feels like you're using your engaged commenters to go and reach more strangers on the internet without actually valuing the person who commented as a human. So really consider, how are you going to do that qualifying? How are you going to discern, is this a lead or a lurker? Because in most cases, it's actually a potential lead. So that's where I love qualifying questions. Now, I don't use them in isolation. I have a little 3-step process. I validate, inform, and ask. So I'll validate what they've said, I'll inform them of something, and I'll ask. So it might be, I've said, what's the biggest challenge you've got with getting qualified leads? And someone says, well, I just feel like I've got a fairly engaged audience, but no one's booking calls. So my first thing to say is validate. So if I was to validate that, I would say, oh, it's so common, right? It can feel so frustrating that you're putting out great content. People think the content is great, but it's not necessarily resulting in leads. Now I need to inform, right? How can I help this person? So it might be, one of the things I find is that when you have people engaging and commenting, you don't know how to discern whether they're commenting to be nice or they're commenting because they're interested. And now I need to ask a question. Is that something you struggle with? So validate, inform, and ask. Not argue with them, tell them that they're wrong, and tell them they need to work with you, which is often something that I do see very pushy marketers do. Instead, validate, inform, ask. How you're feeling is something I see for a lot of people, or it's very reasonable to have that response, or that's what I see with a lot of my clients. Inform, here's what might help you. Here's an approach that I've seen work. Here's some interesting things that I see might fix this for you. Ask a question. So asking qualifying questions isn't always done just asking a question back. So that can sometimes be a way that people do it. So I've seen it before where you get someone who comments and then you just say, oh, thanks so much. Here's my question. Thanks so much. Here's my question. Thanks so much. Here's my question. But it's not actually progressing the conversation in any way. All it's doing is making it feel like they are getting 20 questions. And so it does take a little bit of practice to find your approach, but feel free to use that VIA via little mnemonic device to help you remember, validate, inform, and ask. And you can also ask qualifying questions in a broadcast way. So this is where you've got lurkers, but don't forget that you can bring lurkers out and get them engaging by asking qualifying questions in your actual content. So asking that question of, hey, what's the biggest challenge you have with getting qualified leads? In essence, is me asking a qualifying question in my content. And the people who reply are only going to be the people who are struggling to get qualified leads right now. So the way that I've asked the question automatically is getting response from people who are within my niche, who have a problem I can solve or I can at least help with. And so finding what your broadcast qualifying questions are and how you ask qualifying questions in your one-to-one interactions with people is going to be building a skill set that allows you to do this qualifying and do this discerning far more proactively and effectively. So in that one-to-one example, I use VIA, validate, inform, and ask. And in one-to-many, I try and ensure that I'm asking questions that action takers and the most motivated people within my niche would answer. And I ask in an open-ended way. I don't ask closed questions like yes/no questions or questions that don't give me any potential insight. I'm not leading the witness per se. I'm not asking leading questions like, wouldn't it be amazing if you could get 6 qualified leads in the next 6 days? That's a leading question. It's a yes/no question. And honestly, the people who are mostly struggling with getting qualified leads would be the least likely to answer it. Instead, I'm asking an open-ended question. I'm asking a question that action takers and the most motivated people in my audience would be most likely to answer. So if you think about where your potential clients are on their journey, what is a very specific challenge that's coming up for them? What is a very specific goal or a specific action that they want to take, but they're stuck on for some reason? How can you ask a question around that rather than just asking these very broad questions? So let's say you're a mindset practitioner. Asking what's your biggest money block is going to be so broad, and it doesn't necessarily, for me, speak to the action takers in your audience, right? So what is in your niche an action taker likely to be frustrated that they can't do or they want to do or something's in the way and they know there's a mindset block in the way. So it might be that you say, hey, if you want to consistently send emails to your mailing list, but you really find that your mindset's getting in the way, what do you think is going on? That is going to be far more likely to speak to people who know what their action is and the action that they want to take. But let's even go further. What is someone who is an action taker actually doing and it's not necessarily working for them or they're sabotaging it? So if, let's say, I work in money mindset and I want to help people who recognize they've got a money mindset issue, it might be what is your unique way that you sabotage yourself when you have an influx of income? Right? So people who are like, oh, I don't sabotage myself, they're not going to answer. But for people who are in your niche, who they have a little bit of self-awareness, they're like, oh, whenever I get an influx of income, I end up manifesting a bill. Or whenever I get an influx of income, I somehow manage to spend it all on my kids. Or, like that is such self-awareness, and it's like they're the most motivated people in your audience. So have a think about it through the lens of your own business. Let me give you another example because I think people really struggle with this in a tangible way. Let's say you help people with website development. And so your ideal client might be people who want to upgrade their website that was their first website when they started their business. And so this is their first time doing the big upgrade, the real alignment with what they know is a validated message now, right? So I'm just making up a little bit of niching decisions so that we can ask questions that work well for that audience. So if you were to just ask the question, what's your biggest gripe with your existing website? Well, anyone who has a problem with their website can answer that. That doesn't necessarily mean they want their website upgraded. Instead, think about what is the person who it's on their list to engage a web developer to do a big upgrade in the next few months. What are they fixated on? What are they doing to get ready for that? Or what is getting in the way for them? So it might be thinking about for those of you who are considering a big website overhaul this year, what is the number one difference you want between your new website and your existing website? Or it might be asking, what are you struggling with when it comes to the new copy and messaging for when you're ready to upgrade your website? Because only people who are actually thinking about it will even have put some ideas to paper. They're the ones who actually have an answer. And you might have to ask that multiple times through multiple angles, but it's much better to ask a more direct and specific question and get less answers, but every person who answers is a potential lead, than to ask broad questions and there's no extra insight on whether they're a lead when they answer. And I've talked about this at virtual conference this year because it was about lead generation. And I was saying, can we please all agree to stop asking questions in our content that are just engagement bait, right? Oh, how do you have your cup of tea? Are you a tomato sauce or a barbecue sauce person, right? That kind of engagement baiting that gives you no insight into the person. It gives you no insight into how you might be able to help them. All that's doing is just keeping people engaging, but it's not actually moving you closer to training the algorithm on who your ideal client is. It's not moving you closer to any insight into, is your audience actually interested in working with you? It's not generating any leads. And I don't say this to generate any kind of perfectionism, because what I'd rather you do is ask a bunch of questions that no one responds to so that you can actually learn what is it that is the question that draws out potential leads? What angles do you ask through that give you insights you can actually do something with? And so sometimes I will even ask qualifying questions in my content and I get a bunch of answers, but I realize actually this engagement isn't as valuable as I thought it was going to be, because I can see the people who are answering are not actually the action takers. They're not ready for any further support or anything along those lines. They're actually shutting this down. Do I regret asking that question? No, because now I know. Now I've got that insight. Do I make that mean that every person who commented is not a lead? No, if there's an opportunity for me to ask, I will. I'm still going to follow the VIA process, validate, inform, and ask for every person who's engaged with it. But I know that it's likely not going to lead to a lot of qualified leads. It's more going to get people who are too early in their journey, or it's going to get people who are a little bit outside of the scope of the work that I do. And that's absolutely fine. But it's a very helpful opportunity for me to have a chance to do some of that one-to-one nurture and one-to-one qualifying and invitations. So there you have it. If you aren't sure if someone is a lead or a lurker, the answer is qualifying and learning how to not only qualify those people, those individuals one at a time, but also get more people engaging so you can qualify them is a really important part of your messaging ecosystem. And that brings me to our Tashmas gift for today. And that is my Skyrocket Sales program. Skyrocket Sales is a self-study program to help you improve your sales skills and also the steps and processes you use to attract and convert clients. Now, if you already have Skyrocket Sales, I would still recommend you listen along because I have a bonus for anyone who is enrolled in Skyrocket Sales, whether you joined before or during Tashmas. So for everyone who has Skyrocket Sales, I'm running a bonus live call in April. It's going to include some lead generation strategies and ideas and a live Q&A. If you're already enrolled in Skyrocket Sales, you will receive an email today to invite you along to that call. If you're not enrolled in Skyrocket Sales, if you enroll before the 12th of March, you will be invited to the call. So make sure that you head to the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/514 and you'll find all the details not only to enroll in Skyrocket Sales and get access to this amazing live call, but also I'm discounting the price of Skyrocket Sales for Tashmas to $44 because I'm turning 44. But you'll need to grab your coupon code, so make sure you go and see all the instructions over at tashcorbin.com/514. Now, if you're not sure whether you're enrolled in Skyrocket Sales or not, the best thing to do is check your email because you'll have received one from me today with Skyrocket Sales in the subject line. And if you don't have that email but you're still not sure and you think that maybe you've purchased it, you're always welcome to email support@tashcorbin.com and we can look it up for you. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. Good luck out there qualifying those amazing lurkers and finding those spectacularly qualified leads. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. I'll see you tomorrow for day 6 of Tashmas.